Sarah was rightly proud of her son. He was tall, handsome, educated, and worked as a programmer in an oil company. But it had only been 2 years since he graduated from university, and he was already a department head. And he achieved this all on his own. The talented young employee was noticed because of his professional achievements. Upon hearing the news, Sarah cried tears of joy. Everything turned out just as she had hoped, maybe even better. His son earned a good salary and took out a mortgage on a spacious new apartment in the city center. While the renovations were ongoing, Michael lived with his mother, and Sarah was happy about it. Of course, she understood that Michael was already grown up, and soon he would get married and start his own separate life. But for now, the woman enjoyed the closeness with her son. It brought her joy to cook his favorite dishes and iron his shirts. In the evenings, when Michael returned from work, Sarah would ask him about his day, just like when he was in school. Although recently, her son clearly did not hurry home. He definitely had a girlfriend, but for some reason, Michael did not rush to introduce her to them. Of course, Sarah had often thought about her future daughter-in-law. She dreamed of seeing her son next to a successful, educated woman with a well-to-do family. Michael deserved the best, for he himself was a gift of fate, and Sarah played no small role in making her son into the man he is today. The woman knew this and was proud of herself. Sarah gave birth to Michael when she was already just over 40. At first, young Sarah devoted herself entirely to her studies. She didn't want to return to her native village, to the Coes and younger siblings. She was going to the university on the economics faculty. She enrolled there thanks to her perseverance and hard work, and that was a chance at the life she had always dreamed of, and her efforts did not go to waste. The young, promising student was helped by the dean. He arranged for her to work as an accountant in a local enterprise under his patronage. It was impossible to get there from the street. "Well, Sarah, now everything is in your hands." The professor smiled at her then. "Don't let me down." Taking various courses, reading thematic literature, Sarah, in short, was improving herself. She did not think about her personal life, although hints and even open invitations for a date were regularly received by the pretty Sarah. But she realized that it was too early for a relationship, let alone a family. First, she needed to become financially independent. She had an atypical mindset for a girl of her age. I'll say all of her peers at the time only dreamed of a successful marriage, while Sarah only thought about work. Her hard work did not go in vain. 10 years after university, she had saved enough money to buy an apartment. Sarah felt happy spending her first night in her own home. As at over 30 years old, she had a stable, high-paying job as a chief accountant in a large enterprise. That was time to start thinking about starting a family, and Sarah turned her attention to potential husbands. She had brief non-committal romances before, which helped her relax from serious work. But now Sarah needed something more. A serious relationship with marriage and children in the future. At that time, women without children at her age were considered almost old maids. There were many men around Sarah, quite worthy, intelligent, but the trouble was that they all wore engagement rings. Of those women, who were lucky in this regard, did not work as hard as Sarah for her financial independence. But as they say, fate will find its way. One night, Sarah was returning home by taxi, delayed from work. It was already late at night. The driver was a charming, talkative young man. He looked about 7 years younger than Sarah, and it turned out that he was. Brent joked a lot, causing genuine laughter from the passenger, complimenting her, and somehow subtly led Sarah to openness, and she told him everything about her life. Suddenly, Sarah realized that she wanted the ride to her home to be long and not end soon. It was easy and pleasant to talk with the charming taxi driver. He too did not want to say goodbye and deliberately chose detour routes. In the end, they exchanged phone numbers. Brent caught her the next day, and it all started. Sarah had never felt so desired and loved. It seemed that Brent charged her with his energy and zest for life. Very soon, he moved into his beloved woman's apartment and did not hide his joy about it. He used to live with his parents in their apartment. His sister divorced recently and returned to her father's house with 3 children. From now on, Sarah flew home from work on the wings of love, as she was no longer alone and cold. She was always greeted by Brent, who was friendly and very caring. Brent took care of everything around the house, from cooking to cleaning. Nobody had ever cared for Sarah like that. But that love story ended badly. It took Sarah a few years to realize that Brent was simply using her. If it weren't for the accident, she would probably have ignored the warning signs for a long time. But Brent did not work as a taxi driver for long after moving in with Sarah. At first, he tried to persuade her that the job was hard and dangerous, and clients could be difficult. Then his taxi company closed. Sarah was initially happy. She wanted Brent to find another safer job. She was afraid for her beloved, especially when he worked at night. And jealousy was also present. What if Brent met a beautiful young client and fell in love with her? No, Sarah would have not been able to bear this. Her feelings for Brent were too strong. At first, Brent seemed to be looking for a job, studying ads, making calls, and going to interviews. But nothing worked out. Don't worry, Sarah reassured him. My salary is more than enough. You don't have to rush to find a job yet. And Brent did not rush. However, he sometimes took on odd jobs. He often had to leave at night, sometimes for several days. After such trips, the guy returned happy, and Sarah thought that she understood his feelings. She herself liked feeling financially dependent. She thought that the opportunity to earn money pleased her beloved. But she was wrong. One day, Sarah went to a nearby town for an audit. Brent was working at that time and warned her that he would not be home for at least 2 days. After the audit, Sarah went to a restaurant for dinner, and that's where she saw this ugly scene at the next table. No, it looked very admirable from the outside. The sweet guy looked at the young lady sitting in front of him with loving eyes, stroked her hand, adjusted her hair, and kissed her from time to time. A beautiful couple, a pure feeling. The problem was that this guy was Brent. He didn't notice her, and Sarah was glad about it. Firstly, she didn't want to create a scene in front of her colleagues, and secondly, she needed to gather her thoughts before having a serious conversation, and also to experience this betrayal free somehow. to pour out her emotions when no one saw her. At home, Sarah buried her face in the pillow and started crying. After all, she sincerely loved Brent, made plans for a joint life with him, and now she had to face the fact that Brent had been unfaithful to her. And even came up with names for their son and daughter, which would fit well with her beloved surname. And now all these dreams were over, but the scene she witnessed put everything in its place. Of course, Sarah understood that this was not normal, that she fully supported an adult man who was in no hurry to find work. A period of a few months of temporary crisis is normal, but Brent had been sitting on her neck for a couple of years now, and these supposed odd jobs were just a cover for such meetings with women on the side. Finally, as always, Sarah pulled herself together, gathered her courage, and kicked Brent out of her apartment and out of her life. At first, he tried to justify himself, coming up with implausible explanations, then swore his love and begged for forgiveness. And only at the end, when it became clear that Sarah was resolute, Brent said what he really had in mind. "You're old and I am young. I was drawn to young, beautiful, easygoing girls. And you are cold and bossy. Plus, you're fat. Who needs you?" And Brent left, slamming the door. Sarah thought about his words. Was it really true? Was she really so disgusting? After her breakup with Brent, Sarah became disillusioned with all men. Although she no longer wanted to get married, she still had hopes of becoming a mother and planned to have a child for herself. Sarah had occasional relationships solely to have a child, but it wasn't happening. She couldn't seek medical help for her problem because, at the time, it was considered immoral to plan a child while being single. Sarah eventually concluded that she was infertile and resigned herself to the fact that she would never have a husband or a child. At least she had her job, which was her only outlet. Then, after celebrating her 40th birthday, Sarah finally met her destiny. Gordon, a divorced friend of the company owner, immediately showed obvious signs of attention to the chief accountant. He complimented her, looked at her with admiration, smiled, and one day asked her out. Gordon was vastly different from Brent. He invited Sarah to expensive restaurants, gave her luxurious gifts, and helped her with work. Although Sarah didn't have as strong feelings for him as she did for Brent, she felt desired and loved in Gordon's presence. With him, everything was calm and reliable, so Sarah happily agreed to Gordon's proposal to legalize their relationship. Sarah honestly warned her future husband that she couldn't have children. She was sure of this because none of her attempts, of which there were many, had been successful, but Gordon wasn't worried. He'd already become a father. His son and daughter were graduating from university, and he communicated with them and helped them. That was enough for him. Hepsicking, imagine Sarah's surprise when she discovered that she was pregnant. The woman still remembered the wave of warmth and happiness that enveloped her. And so, the dream that seemed like it would never come true finally became a reality. Gordon was also pleased. He was sure it was a boy and even suggested naming him Michael, after his grandfather. And they did indeed have a boy. However, his father never got to see him. Sarah's personal happiness was short-lived. Gordon's life was taken by a sudden stroke. But the man who was just 47 years old and in the prime of his life, was gone. Sarah took a long time to recover from the loss. And to cope with her heavy feelings, she was helped by the realization that a baby was growing and developing inside her. She had to be strong for him. Michael was born a little prematurely. He was tiny, sickly, and cried a lot. He took all of his mother's attention and energy. Sarah had to spend a lot of money on doctors, but fortunately, she had it. The premature baby had multiple problems, including possible cerebral palsy. But Sarah didn't give up. She searched for outstanding rehabilitation specialists, studied medical news, fought her way into the best medical centers, and it all paid off. By the time he was in school, Michael was not only healthy, but also advanced beyond his years. Easter medals for prize-winning places in swimming hung over his bed. A piano stood in the corner of the child's room, on which the preschooler already played classical pieces quite well, and shelves were overflowing with colorful children's books. His mother tried to instill in him an interest in reading, and she succeeded. Of course, Michael only received top grades in school and continued to please his mother with his athletic achievements. In middle school, Michael became interested in programming. Sarah supported this useful hobby and bought him a powerful computer, some discs, and a bunch of other gadgets. Sarah sponsored her enthusiastic child, and it paid off. Michael soon began to win programming Olympiads. Sarah's heart sang with happiness when her son brought home another certificate. It was then that she realized that her son would go far and achieve much. All of this was the merit of Sarah. She devoted herself to her son, first his health, then his development and upbringing. The woman took him to clubs and sections, went with him to competitions, and combined all of this with her demanding job. Sarah had a hard time without support. Sometimes she looked sadly at the fathers who walked with their children and brought them to kindergarten or school. Gordon would have been a very attentive and caring father. A leaf of him would have been easier and more pleasant. But it turned out as it did, and now the woman did her best for her son. In late motherhood, Sarah saw many advantages. Young mothers often break down on their children or neglect them, pursuing their careers, personal life, meeting with friends, and going to beauty salons. She, on the other hand, perfectly understood that a child was a priceless gift and did not spare time and effort to develop her son. Michael entered the university and passed with excellent grades until the 4th year. Sarah always trembled with fear when she remembered that time. Michael was literally replaced by someone else. He gained some strange friends. At first, Sarah was even glad. Michael devoted almost all his time to studying, just like she did once. But he was a young guy and he needed to have fun, socialize with peers, and fall in love. When, if not now, the woman did not object to his nocturnal walks. Her heart was squeezed with fear. Her imagination drew terrible pictures. But Sarah did not show her feelings. She understood that it had to be this way, but gradually it got to the point that Michael disappeared in clubs almost every night. He would come back in the morning happy and on wobbly legs. He would make it to his bed and lay down on it in his clothes. Yes, it was a difficult period. Of course, his studies suffered greatly. The dean of the faculty called Sarah and warned her that if all of this continued, they would have to expel Michael. The woman was shocked. She tried to talk to her son, but he only snarled and rudely replied. Sarah did not recognize her child. Michael was always so polite, so understanding and considerate, but now he was cursing and swearing. There was so much aggression in his words and movements. Sarah tried to influence Michael with money by simply stopping his financing, only giving him money for transport to the university. But his clubbing continued, and soon the woman realized where her son was getting his money from. Several gold chains and rings were missing from her jewelry box. Her jewelry box was missing some items. Then it turned out that Michael had failed his exams and was expelled. It was too much. Sarah had caused a scandal with Michael, resulting in him insulting her, slamming the door, and disappearing for several weeks. During this time, Sarah was extremely upset and even filed a missing person report, although it was not given proper attention. He's a young man who's just out having fun and will be back, the policeman assured her. At that time, Sarah quarreled with the officer, accusing him of indifference and threatening to complain to the prosecutor's office. However, the man turned out to be right. Michael did return home, almost crawling. He looked pale and disheveled like a homeless person. Sarah understood that her son had problems with drinking. He often couldn't stand on his own 2 feet, spoke nonsense, and responded inappropriately. This was all due to the bad influence of the company he was keeping. Sarah was horrified to realize that she was sometimes afraid of her own son. But just like many years ago when she had to care for a premature, weak baby, the woman gathered her strength and decided to act. She wouldn't give up. She would fight for her child. But this time it was more difficult. Michael refused to go to the doctor and wasn't going to break ties with his new friends. Don't you see that these buddies are dragging you down to the bottom? The woman tried to reason with her son. You are the most successful student in your class. You're a talented programmer. So much work has been invested. And are you willing to do this to your life now? Soon there will be no turning back. But with them, I can be myself, not that perfect boy you imagined. Michael retorted. Finally, I'm free from your pressure. Accept it, and it will be easier. Sarah scolded, cried, pleaded, and tried to talk to her son heart to heart, but nothing worked. It was painful and scary to watch what her loved one was turning into. And there was also a nagging feeling of guilt. She couldn't handle raising her son. It was her failure. She was a bad mother. After about a year of living this way, everything suddenly normalized by itself. This happened after another long absence of Michael. Sarah had almost given up, but a miracle happened. Michael changed again. At first, he started going to nightclubs less often. Then he stopped altogether. Sarah no longer saw her son in that strange state that used to scare her. Michael recovered at the university. His previous achievements helped him. Professors went out of their way to help the talented student, and he even started working again, creating websites for companies. Sarah then decided that her son had gone through a transitional period in his 4th year, and after the crisis, he suddenly matured, took hold of himself, and everything would be fine now. she played a part in this too, of course. Of course, the parenting conversations apparently did not go in vain. Michael snapped when she berated him, but the right words were deposited somewhere in his mind, and in the end, her son made the right choice. At first, Sarah anxiously watched over her son, afraid that everything would repeat itself. However, Michael behaved impeccably. Looking at his mother's worried eyes, he apologized for his behavior. "I understand how much pain I caused you, and I'm ashamed." Michael lowered his head, showing sincere remorse. "I insulted you, took your things, and sold them just to get money for entertainment. And you did so much for me, and I treated you like that?"
Owen, it's all in the past. What's the main thing is that you realized everything and changed. It was an important life lesson for you. But now everything will be fine.
Yes, everything will be fine, I promise. I will definitely return the money for the decoration that I took.
Michael kept his word. He graduated from university with honors and got a good position at a prestigious company. Sarah, who had already retired by that time, had connections, but Michael himself coped well with the task of finding a job. Just from his first salary, he bought his mother gold jewelry even more expensive than those he once took from her box. He handed Sarah a couple of velvet boxes, embarrassed.
The woman said nothing, just hugged her son tightly.
They were the closest and dearest people on earth. Time passed and Michael worked, bought an apartment and started renovating it. Occasionally, Sarah traveled with her son. Michael involved his mother into this fascinating hobby, often giving her interesting tours around the country, and sometimes he went with her himself. It seemed that there were no secrets between the mother and son. They talked about all sorts of things and discussed everything in the world. However, Sarah understood that Michael had a girlfriend about whom he was somehow silent. The woman tried to ask questions, but her son answered evasively and once said directly that everything has its time. And Sarah stopped asking. After all, an adult has the right to a personal life. There was another forbidden topic for conversation. Michael never talked about what happened to him during that difficult period, why he suddenly changed, what kind of friends he had at that time, what the guy was doing when he didn't come home for Mrs. Days, and most importantly, how he managed to break free from a bog pulling him down. Michael immediately became gloomy and closed when Sarah tried to talk to him, and the woman gradually stopped trying. Sarah sat in her armchair and embroidered as she had recently taken up needlework. It was a soothing pastime, and the beautiful pictures she created were pleasing. The living room wall was already covered with them. Previously, Sarah was always occupied with her son and work, and there simply wasn't enough energy for such pleasant little things as needlework. The TV was playing in the background, showing the plot of the next soap opera. Not that Sarah loved these sentimental series, she just sometimes wanted to watch something light and unburdening. The years probably take their toll. After all, she's almost 65. Soon perhaps grandchildren will come. But the phone on the coffee table rang and Sarah looked at the screen. It was her son calling. "Hello, Mom. I have a request for you. Can you prepare something special for dinner tonight? You're good at many things. let's choose something at your discretion. Of course, with pleasure. Can you be more specific about what you want? Mom, it's not for me. We have a guest today. I'll introduce you to my fiancé. What? Sarah sat up straight in her chair. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I would have prepared more. It's such a grand event. But just prepare one of your favorite dishes and I'll buy wine. That's enough. No, it's not enough, Sarah objected. What about matching napkins and tableware? What about candles? What about decor? I want to welcome your fiancé with dignity. Mom, what candles? Sarah felt her son smiling. Just set the table for 3. Charlie's doesn't like excessive formality. So, her name is Charlie, Sarah said. She suddenly realized it was the only thing she knew about the girl her son loved. Who is she? How old is she? What does she do? Tell me something at least. They'll talk about it when we meet, Michael promised. It will be a topic for conversation. You'll like her. She's nice. His hours passed quickly, and Sarah was busy with pleasant chores. She went to the store for matching napkins and candles, and she needed to buy something else. Something else for the table. Sarah baked a goose with apples in the oven, a dish that she excelled at, made a couple of salads, and beautifully set the table by the appointed time. Soon her son and Charlize would arrive. She must be a very worthy and beautiful girl since Michael chose her. Sarah wondered who her parents were because she so depended on the family. Would the girl like their apartment? But she find the ambience too simple. Sarah's heart was pounding with joyful anticipation. Her son said he would introduce her to his fiancé. That meant they decided to get married. What happiness! The time was not far off when Michael would give her grandchildren. Sarah couldn't wait to spoil the little ones. She believed she would be the perfect grandmother, the one that neither she nor her son ever had. This caring, loving, attentive. Finally, the sound of the door opening was heard. Sarah went to the hallway to greet her guests. Her son came into the apartment first. Behind him was a young girl, slender, pale, and shy. Impatience in her hands was a simple leatherette bag, and on her feet worn ballet flats from a Chinese store. Sarah immediately noticed these details. Welcome, dear guests. The woman found the strength to smile. Charlize modestly sat next to Michael. Sarah sat opposite the girl. She was cute, of course, delicate like a deer. Michael looked even more masculine and strong next to her. The woman could fully understand what attracted her son to this young creature. It turned out that Charlize was a couple of years younger than Michael. After graduating from nursing school, she worked in a private clinic. Sarah began to ponder. The profession is certainly noble and necessary, but why not become a doctor instead of a nurse? Either Charlize lacks ambition, or she was lazy, or she was not smart enough. None of these options are good. Then Sarah found out that Michael and Charlize had been dating for several years. They met at a bus stop during rainstorms, which seemed quite original and even romantic in the era of internet dating. Fate brought us together, Michael said with exaggerated solemnity, and then added seriously, Charlize is my guardian angel, the love of my life. The girl smiled shyly, and Sarah felt a pang of jealousy. Then she asked Charlize about her family, and it turned out that the girl had come to the city from a small town in the countryside. The girl moved from a village to study. Her parents are poor, and they have 4 more children besides Charlie's. Entering her studies, the girl lived in a dormitory and worked part-time since the scholarship was not enough to cover her expenses. After graduation, she got a job and life became easier. There were funds for rent, clothes, and food. Later, she accidentally met Michael and realized that she had fallen in love. No wonder you fell in love, Sarah thought to herself. He's a guy with an education and a good job, an ideal option for someone like you. Sarah realized that her son was Charlize's only chance to escape poverty. Perhaps it was Michael's success that attracted her. That up to irritation. Despite her modesty and upbringing, Sarah felt dislike towards Charlize. She's pretending to please me, the woman decided, and after the wedding, she will show her true face. But it's okay. I will talk to my son. He doesn't notice anything now because of his strong feelings. But to avoid putting her son in an awkward position, Sarah pretended to be friendly. Michael, in turn, appeared to be in love and happy. Sarah understood him. She was once in love too. Many years ago, a charming young taxi driver, Brent, had also made her head spin, and it took her several years to realize that he was using her shamelessly. But Sarah didn't want such a scenario for Michael. After dinner, Michael went to see Charlize off to the taxi. Sarah found the strength to smile goodbye, but Charlize noticed the true emotions of her future mother-in-law. Sensitive person, but most importantly, the son did not understand anything, thought Sarah. Sarah dreamed of a different life for her successful and promising son, not a poor girl who didn't even have a higher education. She planned to talk to him cautiously, so as not to hurt or push him away. Well, what do you think of Charlize?
She's charming, isn't she?
Cute, yes. Sarah didn't argue.
Serious. I think can be more serious. I love her more than life itself, he said, and we're getting married by the end of the year. That's my decision.
But maybe you shouldn't rush it. Go out, who's stopping you? A protector is tricastry allow, but a wedding, it's a very serious commitment. Mom, what's wrong with you? Don't you like Charlize? What's wrong with her? She is a poor girl from the village, said Sarah, finally deciding to be honest. She has no high education, no prospects. I cure her to get to a comfortable life. I don't want you to be used. Do you think I can only be loved for my car, apartment, and salary, and I'm nothing by myself? What? I don't mean that at all, Sarah protested. You're the most wonderful person. You deserve the best. But Charlie, she's not the right match for you. Don't rush. You'll find a bride who suits you better. This is a size completely base. I never told you, but there was a time in my life when I had an albatross sitting on my neck. That was painful and humiliating.
Mom, don't talk about her like that, Michael said reproachfully.
And Sarah immediately understood that if she continued in the same vein, she would lose her son's favor. He was too charmed by Charlize now. You and Charlize have a lot in common. Not so much. I didn't try to improve my financial situation by marrying a rich man. I achieved everything myself.
Mom, Michael said in a chiding tone.
Okay, sorry, his mother sighed. Since you've chosen her, she must be perfect. You'll like her someday when you get to know her better.
Michael finally smiled.
After this conversation, Sarah tried many times to dissuade her son, hinting to him that he shouldn't rush, that he should look closer at his bride-to-be. But Michael remained unyielding. He claimed that he loved Charlize and that their feelings were tested by time. He also begged his mother to treat his fiancée kindly. Sarah tried very hard not to show her dislike, but sometimes she just couldn't help herself. "Why didn't you get a higher education?" Sarah asked Charlize once. This question kept bothering her. Her friends already knew that her son was preparing for a wedding, and of course they asked about the bride. Sarah even felt a bit awkward answering their questions, and now she wanted to put Charlize in the same uncomfortable position.
And I had to work. The girl shrugged.
After I finished nursing school, I was asked to vacate the dormitory, so I had to work. You can't study at a medical school remotely. I couldn't combine studying with work. Sarah shook her head, thinking to herself that the girl was just lazy. It's in her own time. She had worked from dawn until dusk and had not relied on a rich boyfriend to improve her financial situation. The young couple decided not to have a lavish wedding, instead choosing a dinner with their closest friends at a restaurant before flying off for a beach vacation. Sarah was upset with this because she had dreamed of a grand celebration with a bride in a white dress and veil, her handsome son in an elegant suit, family and friends on both sides. After their honeymoon, the newlyweds moved into Michael's apartment, which he had already renovated. At first, the young couple visited Sarah often, but their visits dwindled and eventually stopped altogether. "Have you forgotten about me completely?" Sarah asked her son indignantly during a phone call. "You're always nitpicking at Charlie's," Michael explained. "That's why we don't come over anymore, to avoid irritating you unnecessarily." "She's not turning me against you, Sarah. I love Charlie's, and I love you too. Don't make me choose between the two." Sarah did indeed try to criticize Charlize every chance she got. She often commented on Charlize's clothing, her inability to discuss art and literature, her loud spoon clanking against a cup while stirring sugar, and her loud laughter. However, she probably voiced her feelings to her husband later. That's with each passing day, Charlize annoyed Sarah more and more. She's not pretending to be modest. These villagers from a poor family are so cunning, worldly wise, and experienced that it was probably easy for her to deceive my respectable, intelligent son. It was probably an easy task for her, complained Sarah to her friend. One day, Sarah had a strong stomach ache that made it impossible to breathe. She decided not to wait in line at a state clinic and instead went to a good private clinic. Within an hour, she was sitting outside the doctor's office. How different private clinics are from state ones. A smiling staff, a friendly atmosphere, stylish interiors, no unpleasant people, no horrible smells. Sarah was asked to wait for 5 minutes, and she settled on a soft leather couch, opening a magazine lying on the table. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice. "Please, come in. Leonard is waiting for you," Charlie said with a smile to a patient. Life will put everything in its place from that day on. she started to consider Charlie's not only a village gold digger and a lazy person, but also an unfaithful wife. How else? Sarah had eyes and she clearly saw how her daughter-in-law was flirting with a doctor at work. Of course, Michael will find out later and understand that his mother was right and the boy will face a big disappointment and pain. Sarah decided to celebrate her 65th birthday grandly. She couldn't have a lavish wedding, but her soul demanded a grand feast. Therefore, the woman booked a large hall in a restaurant, paid for a luxurious dinner, and invited dozens of guests, former colleagues and friends. Of course, she invited her son and daughter-in-law, although she didn't want to see Charlie's, but then Michael wouldn't have come either. The celebration was great. The host entertained the guests with fun contests and jokes, and the waiters served delicious dishes on time. Sarah glanced at her daughter-in-law, who probably had never been to such parties before. Charlie's was quiet and modest, seeming a bit shy. Sarah was pleased with it. Of course, the country girl felt out of place in decent company. Meanwhile, the guests took turns saying kind words about Sarah and listing her career achievements. They praised her ability to make friends and her strong character. Sarah was melting with pleasure. It was nice that her loved ones noticed her merits and appreciated them. Then it was time for her son to make a toast. He got up with Charlie's. Sarah looked at Michael and was charmed by his handsome appearance. He looked like a Hollywood actor in his jacket and shirt. Michael spoke touching words of love for his mother and praised her for all she had done for him. Suddenly, he said something that surprised everyone, including Sarah. But our biggest gift to you will be in March, when you will come to the maternity hospital for your grand scene. There was applause. Congratulations rained. People smiled. Someone even shed a tear. Charlie's looked down shyly, while Michael encouraged her by hugging her shoulders. Only Sarah sat with a stony face, unhappy thoughts swirling in her head. Protagonists in March. That means Charlie's was about halfway through her term, and Michael told her only now, as if she were a stranger. At it being said of being happy, that the grandchild she had long dreamed of would soon appear, Sarah felt an unpleasant feeling that she had become a secondary character in her son's life. And all because of whom? Because of the village girl who flirts with doctors at work while pregnant. Sarah later regretted her behavior. But what's done is done. When everyone calmed down a bit, Sarah got up from her seat and asked that terrible question. Michael, are you sure the child is yours? At that moment, the scene from the clinic was clearly in Sarah's mind. The doctor was devouring Sarah's daughter-in-law with his eyes, charming Charlie's smiling back at him. Sparks were clearly flying between colleagues. But what else could Sarah think? The toastmaster tried to turn everything into a joke. He succeeded to some extent. Tapped Norbiton's at Terry's. But guests laughed, but her son Michael's face froze, pain and disappointment freezing in his eyes. Charlie's first blushed to the roots of her hair, then turned around and left the room without looking back. Michael, giving his mother a disappointed look, hurried after his wife. Sarah suddenly realized that her son was now truly angry with her. Irritations, the guests behaved as if nothing had happened, enjoying themselves, singing songs, participating in competitions. Everyone preferred to ignore the awkward moments, not to spoil the celebration. An old friend came to Sarah and supported her. Her son had recently divorced, and his wife had received half of the property, which she had nothing to do with, and now she was not allowing her former mother-in-law to see her grandchildren. "I wish I could have been as brave and direct as you were in my time," the friend said, shaking her head and hugging Sarah by the shoulders. Michael got offended. "How can we make peace with him now?" asked upset Sarah. "Truth is too unpleasant. That's why it stings the eyes. Don't worry, he's your own son. He'll understand everything, and his mother will always forgive him," comforted the friend. However, Michael seemed to have no intention of forgiving his mother. Sarah tried calling him several times, but he ignored her calls and then even blocked her number. 2 months passed and Sarah couldn't find peace. She missed her son and wanted to hear his voice and see his beloved eyes. She longed for their heartfelt conversations and walks together. The woman regretted what happened on her anniversary, but she didn't change her opinion about Charlize. On the contrary, she became more convinced that the child was not Michael's. Charlize was afraid of being exposed, so she prevented communication between mother and son. Sarah would have told him everything she saw. He would have found out that her suspicions were not unfounded, and he would have doubted her. Meanwhile, Michael had erected an invisible barrier around his family and did not let his mother, once his closest and beloved person, inside. Sarah had never felt so lonely before. If something happened to her now, it seemed that no one would notice. But then one day, Michael came to her house unannounced. He opened the door with his key and walked into the hallway as if nothing had happened. Sarah was sitting with her handicraft in front of the TV at that moment. His unexpected appearance excited and pleased her. Sarah jumped up and her embroidery fell straight to the floor. Michael looked calm and determined. Such a grown-up, real man. How she missed him. "Michael, you've come," exclaimed the woman, trying to embrace her son, but he evaded her. "Mom, we need to talk very seriously. That's about the incident on the anniversary. I regret it myself, really. Well, then maybe you'll come with me now to our place and ask Charlize for forgiveness." Ask Charlize for forgiveness. Sarah blinked in surprise. I'm not guilty before her. I wanted to ask for forgiveness from you. I should have told you the truth about your wife in private. You know, I saw her. So you still don't understand anything.
Michael interrupted, looking at his mother with bitterness.
Okay, it's my own fault. I should have told you right away when I noticed you didn't like Charlize, but she stopped me. She asked me not to worry you unnecessarily, and she didn't want to look like a saintly savior in your eyes.
But since that's the case, make some tea, Michael suddenly asked, settling on the couch.
We're going to have a very long conversation. You need to know a lot. Michael began this story when a new student joined their group during their 4th year. Barry wasn't doing well academically, to put it mildly. He had barely managed to get back after being expelled and was a couple of years older than his classmates. Punctual-mannered Michael was immediately taken aback by Barry's free communication style. Barry would even crunch on chips during lectures without responding to the lecturer's remarks. He would often argue with teachers, answer phone calls during class, and leave the classroom in the middle of a lecture. He also skipped class frequently. Barry was not very social with his classmates, and he made it clear that he thought they were too young and inexperienced to be friends with someone as cool as him. He was constantly receiving phone calls, and from the snippets of conversation, it was clear that he regularly attended parties, went to nightclubs, and traveled. Michael felt a twinge of envy towards Barry. He even had a special gait that was free and relaxed, unlike Michael, who had always strictly adhered to the framework set by his mother. She instilled in him the belief that well-mannered, decent people should behave in a certain way. Michael tried to follow her teachings, but now, looking at Barry, he realized that life could be lived differently. But now, looking at Barry, he realized that life could be lived differently. Michael had studies, home, work on the internet, trips with classmates to the cinema or bowling, occasional dates with shy girls, and interesting books. These were the only things that made up Michael's gray weekdays. On the other hand, Barry seemed to be living a fuller and more vibrant life, one that he'd chosen for himself, not one that was imposed on him. Michael had seen violators of discipline before, but they were just clowns trying to attract attention with their behavior. Barry was different. He didn't seem to care about others' opinions at all. Accusation University life looked gray and insignificant in comparison to Barry's interesting life. Michael realized that it was time to change something and that he was tired of living by imposed rules. He didn't want to lead a miserable existence as a model student anymore. He felt that life was passing him by and nothing bright or interesting was happening. After university, it would be work, followed by marriage and children. This was the life script that his mother had planned for him, and it didn't include any entertainment, fun, or adventure. Barry became an example for Michael to follow. He began to copy his manner of speech and gestures, sometimes unconsciously. Requirements, Michael even dared to answer a teacher rudely who made a remark to him. The students were surprised, as nobody expected such behavior from him. Barry turned around and looked at Michael with clear interest, even conspiratorially winking at him. During the break, Barry approached Michael. "You seem to differ from this herd of sheep," he said, deliberately stretching the words. "You seem to differ from this herd of sheep," he said, deliberately stretching the words. "They're humiliated, but they're silent. That's fear. I'm not like that," Michael reassured, pleased with his idol's praise. "Then it must be fun with you," Barry slapped his classmate on the shoulder. "Classmate, come to the nightclub tonight. We often hang out there with friends." Of course, Michael went to the club that night. He really wanted to experience the fun life that his new classmate led. Before, Michael did not like nightclubs. They were dark, stuffy, smoky. The music was loud and the dance floor was overcrowded. If he were to be honest, Michael did not enjoy dancing either. He had been to clubs a few times with friends to meet girls, but the ladies preferred other guys just like Barry and his acquaintances. Light, open, confident, daring, and decisive. But today, Michael felt just like that. Barry and his company accepted Michael as their own. They drank, danced, and their group was replenished with beautiful girls. In the presence of Barry, Michael felt like a real macho. The words flowed from him, and the girls listened attentively and admired. It was just great. Closer to dawn, Michael felt exhausted. "This is for energy," he said to Michael, who was surprised. "Herbal ingredients, no chemistry, natural product." Barry reassured him. "We need a little refreshment." Michael realized what Barry was offering him and was worried about it, but he couldn't refuse in front of everyone. After some time, Michael felt an unprecedented surge of strength. He felt like a hero in a movie, beautiful, confident, pumped up, capable of any feat. The par felt for any even climbing a multi-story building on the wall. It seemed that anything was possible. Then consciousness turned off. Michael woke up in a garage on an inflatable mattress. Next to him, covered with a blanket, lay a beautiful but apparently overdone, unfamiliar girl. Several young men and women, including Barry, were also sleeping here. Some were on an old couch, some were on the same mattress as Michael, and some were just on the floor. Michael did not remember what had happened. His head was pounding, everything was spinning before his eyes, and nausea rose in his throat. Yesterday was good and fun, but it seems that now the reckoning was coming, and Michael was ready to pay this price for a bright, unforgettable evening.
"Wake up, bro," Barry croaked, turned over to the other side. "You passed out abruptly last night. Even thought of calling an ambulance." Hud sighed, "But you're fine now."
Since then, Michael began to communicate with Barry and his friends. These were entirely new feelings, unlike anything he had experienced before. Michael now felt much more confident and had learned to behave more freely. Much of what had seemed important before had now lost all value. For example, dreams of a career. Previously, Michael was shy about meeting girls, didn't know how to behave with them, and was embarrassed in their presence. Now, in the company of Barry and his friends, he easily made acquaintances for 1 or 2 evenings, following their example. Drinks may have played a role, but also someone in the company always had something interesting to eat. Plus, all of this made the world brighter, sensations sharper, and emotions more vivid. Michael now hardly communicated with his friends from his past life. What did they know about real fun? These losers were only interested in the upcoming session and exams. Michael was influenced by Barry's calmness, who didn't worry about studying at all. He had other more interesting plans. You see, Barry planned a grand party at his parents' country house, and Michael was invited. The guy eagerly awaited the appointed day. The event promised to be not boring. The only thing that spoiled the fun was his mother, or rather her constant complaints. Previously, Michael had not noticed how stuffy and unpleasant she was, but now he found himself irritated by her constant preaching. Sometimes he caught himself thinking that to interrupt the flow of tedious moralizing, he was ready even to hit his own mother. One day he almost acted on these impulses when he raised his hand to her. His mother initially looked scared, but then surprised. As that day, Michael's body was breaking down, and his head was hurting from a night spent partying with friends. And here was his mother with her eternal advice. So almost snapped. Another issue was money. Before, Michael had made money by creating websites for various companies, and his mother generously gave him pocket money. although he wasn't rich, he never felt a lack of funds. However, he no longer had the time, energy, or desire to work part-time, and his mother stopped giving him money. She only provided him with enough for transportation and food every day. And Michael needed the money because fun didn't come cheap. One day, Michael remembered that his mother kept a box of gold jewelry on the top shelf of the linen closet. He'd known about it since childhood and decided to steal it. He took some jewelry to the nearest pawn shop and soon became a regular there. Strangely enough, he didn't feel guilty about it at the time, as he was focused on getting the money he needed to maintain his lifestyle. Apparently, his brain had already begun to degenerate. True, he did not realize it at the time and did not regret anything. Michael failed the session and did not show up for exams, just like Barry. But when his mother found out, it caused another scandal, which finally pushed Michael over the edge. He swung at her again and probably would have hit her in the face if she had not dodged. Sarah turned pale, covered her face with her hands, and burst into tears. Michael saw his mother crying for the first time, but even this sight did not make him come to his senses. He waited for her to go to the store and snuck into her room. And the same box was there. He still had time to go to the pawn shop, and he needed money before it closed. Michael wanted to distract himself, relieve the tension, have some fun or anything to avoid the unbearable feeling of irritation. However, an unpleasant surprise awaited him. Sarah had discovered the missing jewelry and hid the box. At tics in anger, Michael smashed several plates and rushed out of the apartment, which was already starting to feel like a prison to him. He went to Barry's garage, where his friend was recovering from last night's party. Neither of them looked excellent. Michael shared his problems with his friend about having no money, being unable to stay at home, and how his mother doesn't even let him breathe calmly. Barry suggested, "Live here in the garage for now. This is my residence. My relatives haven't looked here for a long time. Have as long as you want. And about the money, I have an idea." The idea turned out to be nothing more than a suggestion to break into a local grocery store that closed at 7 in the evening and was guarded by an old man. Bree distracted the guard, while Michael quickly cleared the warehouse. Boxes of cereals, sausages, canned goods, and drinks were all stuffed into a huge bag. Then they took all the loot to some man in an apartment who counted out a few bills for them. Michael realized that Barry had been doing this for some time. Well, never mind. Now they had money for the evening, which, by the way, had already come. Michael lived in a garage for about a week, during which time he realized that he needed to change his ways and work on improving his relationship with his mother. During that week, he drank a lot and felt bad. He already didn't like his new life but couldn't go back to the old one. At some point, he stopped realizing reality altogether and suddenly found himself at a bus stop on the outskirts of the city. How did he get there? Why was he shivering so much and breathing so hard? And most importantly, what should he do now? With no strength to think, Michael lay down on a bench and decided to let whatever happens happen. Really, he was already prepared for the worst, his passing from life. Strangely enough, this scenario almost didn't scare him. It was cold and raining with snow, and a piercing wind was blowing. People had long been sitting at home, and there was nowhere to wait for salvation. Would anyone help a dirty, ragged, homeless person like Michael? He realized that they would probably just think he was drunk and passed out and pass him by. And then a miracle happened. A beautiful young girl suddenly leaned over him with worried eyes and an excited voice. The girl looked so pure and noble, especially compared to the ladies that Barry had been spending time with recently. "Are you feeling unwell?" asked the stranger. "Should I call an ambulance?" Michael muttered something incoherent. The girl immediately took out her phone from her coat pocket and called an ambulance. While waiting for the paramedics, the stranger measured Michael's pulse. Fear was visible on her face. The guy concluded that his condition was bad. But despite the pain, nausea, and dizziness, he wanted to admire the girl's kind eyes. The ambulance arrived quickly, and they loaded Michael into the vehicle. The girl held his hand and spoke encouraging words the whole time. To Michael's great joy, she went with them. It turned out that even in such a state, he could find reasons for joy. Michael was saved by a miracle. You should be grateful to this girl all your life. She saved your life, another person said to him. Luckily, another couple of minutes, and that would be it, the doctor said strictly to Michael. Speaking was still difficult for him. "Do you want me to tell someone where you are?" "No, my mother can't know about this for anything." "It's your right, you're an adult, so you decide," the doctor said. "By the way, if this happens again, you probably won't survive it. You are lucky this time, but you need to get treated urgently. Think about my words." Michael thought and decided that he would be more careful about the number of pills he used. As many people used them, and he saw it every day, so he knows the measure. Nothing terrible will happen. Michael dreamed of getting out of the hospital as soon as possible to meet Barry. He missed the fun, laughter, and carelessness. The hospital walls were oppressive, and the procedures were exhausting. By the way, none of his new friends visited Michael in the hospital, although he called Barry as soon as he could and told him where he was. Barry sympathized over the phone and said that yes, it happens. He only asked not to mention his name to anyone and not to talk about others. Meanwhile, Charlize, the girl from the bus stop, came to see Michael several times. It turned out that she was also a nurse, so she could quickly and accurately assess his condition. The first time Charlize visited Michael was to find out how he was doing. She was afraid that they hadn't saved him. Finding out that everything was fine, the girl breathed a sigh of relief. Somehow imperceptibly, Michael told Charlize about everything that had been happening to him lately. The girl listened attentively, without interrupting. During his monologue, Michael realized how terrible his story sounded. He was ashamed of himself. He was kicked out of university, ruined his relationship with his mother, took her jewelry, and hung out with a bad crowd. Decent people needed to stay away from people like him. Balopation. But to his surprise, the girl stayed with him for a long time. Teacher on that day until the end of the visiting hours. They talked about abstract topics, and Michael admired her beautiful face, slender figure, and charming smile. Charlize came to visit him a few more times and apparently enjoyed talking to Michael. One day she opened up to him and shared her story. But turned out that Charlize had come to the city from a village, having grown up in a penniless and large family. That despite the challenges, she always studied well and worked hard. She had 2 dreams: to escape poverty and to help people. Both of these dreams had come true as she had managed to finish school and become a nurse, helping people every day. Charlize was proud that she had worked hard and didn't depend on anyone. Compared to her story, Michael's life seemed even less attractive. She'd always been there for him, and Michael could not even finish his studies at university. The conversations with Charlize made Michael think about his life and reconsider his views on things. Being around Barry's friends no longer seemed appealing to Michael. Charlize herself was like a magnet to him, and he never wanted to say goodbye when it was time to part. The best part was that she seemed to feel the same way. Michael wondered how such a pure, beautiful, and noble girl could find anything to love in someone like him. She had seen him at his worst, pathetic, twisted, and vomiting after drinking too much. Nothing but disgust could have come from this sight, but instead, Charlize started to feel sorry for him and show concern. She even visited him in the hospital to check on his condition and maybe she saw something in him, something for which he could be loved. Michael had long felt disgust towards himself. After leaving the hospital, Michael went back home. His mother never found out that he had spent a week in the hospital, thinking that he had just been wandering around, like he often did lately. He and Charlize continued to meet and talk on the phone. Talking to her made Michael feel exhilarated, and he felt better and cleaner. Michael knew that Charlize was an attractive girl, and passersby's glances during their walks confirmed this. Even Andrew at the clinic where Charlize worked offered to date her. Michael had seen this doctor once, when he met Charlize after work and realized that Andrew had been in love with her for a long time. A young man with sharp facial features and a sporty figure, deemed intelligent and successful, was passed over by Charlize in favor of Michael, a failure who was expelled from university and nearly died. It was nothing short of a miracle that they ended up together. After Michael was discharged from the hospital, Barry appeared on the scene once again, inviting him to the club to celebrate his recovery. And Michael agreed. He honestly tried to start a new life, but despite his efforts, he found himself drawn back to his old habits and yearning for the oblivion they brought. He missed that feeling. Amidst the fun, Charlize called. She somehow sensed that Michael was in danger and demanded that he leave immediately. Michael hesitated. He was having so much fun and was certain nothing bad would happen. "Either you come to me now," she said, "or we will never see each other again." Charlize's voice was firm and decisive. There was no doubt she was serious. Michael surveyed a crowd of dancing people, loud music, and cigarette smoke rising in the air. Reached him his mind. He remembered Andrew's sad look when she took Michael's arm on the porch. Michael blinked and the scene changed. Big stuck scene. Now he lay resigned at a bus stop, facing his own inevitable end. An anxious, beautiful face leaned over him. Michael called a taxi and went to Charlie. The choice was easy. Charlize hugged him tightly, pressing against him. "I was afraid it was too late, that I would lose you again," she admitted. "They'll never hang out with them again," Michael replied, stroking her shiny red hair. "I don't need anyone in my life except for you." And the man kept his promises. Plus, whenever Barry or anyone else from the company offered to have a good time, Michael responded with a categorical refusal. Soon his former friends gave up on him, and Michael began to rebuild his life. He returned to university, started studying again. He tried very hard to become independent as soon as possible and make a beloved proposal. His mother couldn't have been happier with her son, who had made up his mind. But it seemed to her that he had realized his mistakes and made the right choice. Michael and Charlize decided not to tell her what really happened. It was too scary and ugly a story. Michael didn't introduce Charlize to his mother because he wanted to present her as his fiancée, not just a girl from the street. He felt it was the right thing to do. Finally, 2 years after graduating from university, Michael realized that the material base was ready and he could start a family. He made a proposal to Charlize, and although it wasn't a surprise for her, it made her pleased. However, there was only one hitch with meeting Michael's mother. Charlize immediately realized that his mother didn't like her. Sarah, of course, tried to hide it, but it didn't work out very well. Michael believed that everything would change after the wedding, but it only got worse. Charlize pretended that everything was fine, that his mother's behavior didn't bother her at all. But Michael saw that his wife was really struggling with the situation. The man himself sincerely wondered how anyone could not like Charlize. She was perfect, beautiful, kind, loyal, caring, and brave. How could one not understand that it was a great fortune to meet such a unique person? Michael hoped that the news of their grandchild would change his mother's attitude towards his wife, which is why he didn't tell her about Charlize's pregnancy. Charlize's pregnancy waited for the solemn moment. Although Charlize doubted that it was a good idea to announce such news to everyone, Michael assured her that it would have greater effect. The man was taken aback by the hurtful words his mother had spoken. At that night, he spent a long time calming down his upset wife and berating himself for his foolishness. Charlize had been right all along. He should never have told everyone about her pregnancy in public. He thought it would make a beautiful surprise and an expensive gift for his mother's anniversary, but it had turned out to be ugly instead. Since then, the young couple had cut off communications with Sarah. Michael was deeply offended by her words and refused to answer her calls. Charlize urged him to reconcile with his family, reminding him that he would never be happy or at peace otherwise, and that she didn't want that for him. A bad peace is better than a good quarrel, and then, after all, the baby will be born soon, Charlize reminded. Children should not grow up in an atmosphere of hostility. Sarah was stunned. She realized that she could have lost her son forever. He had been so close to leaving this world. She remembered his behavior during that difficult period. He was aggressive, strange, and cold. Michael had been completely disinterested in his education and career and had only been concerned about money, even taking most of her gold jewelry to pawn. Sarah had blamed his dissolute lifestyle and youthful maximalism. But it turned out that the matter was much more serious. He had almost died. Charlize had saved him twice, first by calling an ambulance at the bus stop, and then by giving him an ultimatum when he was at the club with Barry. Michael could have easily returned to his old ways, but Charlie's love and faith in him had stopped him. Sarah sighed deeply, tears welling up in her eyes. She was experiencing a mix of emotions: belated fear for her son, guilt towards the girl who had saved him, and immense gratitude towards her. What have I done? Charlie's probably won't forgive me now.
You don't know her at all. I've told you many times she's wonderful and unique. I'm lucky I've met her.
Now we understand how lucky we are to have her.